Trump's speeches are full of moments that make you just stop and think a little bit about what he might mean. But today we've got one that stands out even for him. It has to do with Medicare. Let's listen.
And they want to raid Medicare to pay for socialism. Somehow I don't see Indiana being the next Venezuela. I just don't see it.
I agree with him. I don't see it either, actually.
The guy in the green in the back is like, wait a minute. Go with it. Peter, you drove all this way to a rally. You said you were gonna go.
Yeah.
But you know this makes no sense.
Yeah, I honestly wonder if they are sweetening the crowd response sounds on these rallies, because the shot of the people behind Trump, he's barely ever getting more than 10% of people actually laughing at these jokes. Everybody else is like, oh, I wanted to come, but I don't know if I can get on board with anything he's saying.
He was probably tackled in the next, in like 5 minutes. I mean, honestly, we talked about this earlier this morning on John's show, The Damage Report, but the idea that like raiding Medicare to pay for socialism is like saying, you know, they just want to raid the fridge to make your dinner. These women, they're just raiding the fridge, making the dinner. Where'd the food go, huh? Like, you know.
First of all, that sounds amazing, and I'm hungry now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It was puzzling, though. Explain to me what, you know, oftentimes you can really just work yourself up in knots trying to figure out what Trump was actually speaking about. But here I really was a little confused. I mean, it struck me as something sort of the leading edge of a talking point that we're going to hear more and more. But otherwise, I can't decode this easily.
Well, I think that you're sort of right. I think, I don't know if it's the leading edge of a talking point, but certainly of a narrative, in that because we have these very popular up and coming, in some cases DSA-backed candidates, socialism as a term is out there. And unfortunately, as with most other terms and political terms, in America, we don't know what they mean. We don't know history, we don't know geography, we don't know political science, we don't know psychology, I could go on. But we don't understand those things. And so Donald Trump can say effectively whatever he wants about socialism. The only information that most of the people in the crowd have is that they know that some socialist countries 40 or 50 years ago that they're familiar with were failures. And they might see some bad news about Venezuela in the news, which is of course why he referenced it there. And if they
by the
watch
way, that's
Fox
the only
News,
information that Trump has also.
Exactly. If you ask Donald Trump to define socialism, what do you think he would say? How specific of a definition can he give?
Ironically, because socialized medicine is part of democratic socialism, the likes of which I think a lot of candidates are running on, and that Bernie Sanders inspired the country on, which is more of a Scandinavian democratic socialism. Like, if you strip all that away, the socialism that's left, which is like big statues and military parades, like all that stuff is stuff Trump would love. Like he would actually want to pay for that.
Well, but I mean, to be fair, that's socialism is not that, right? It's socialism. That's fascism, and that usually those statues go up under autocrats and all this sort of thing. But it's a fair point that he's clueless as to what socialism actually is, and even communism and socialism are thrown around as awful terms, and you can say, well, they're awful in their purest forms, but there are aspects of socialism that are being applied with the with subsidies to major corporations in this country, and we have socialism here, but it's for the rich. In large measure. So any real substantive conversation associated with socialism, has to include that.
Or just recently with farmers, because of Trump's tariffs, he decides to just redistribute money to help make up for his own platforms. Here's how I think he would define socialism at a rally, just to get people riled up. He'd say, socialism, they're gonna take your money, they're gonna take your hard-earned money, and they're gonna give it to the elites. It's called upward reverse socialism, and it's very dangerous.
It's like a trickle up. It's a spilling upwards. It's like the mystery spot.
Yeah, it was like if I take this coffee and it would just float into the air towards the elites, and America doesn't want that, and that's a good argument. It's a solid, reasoned argument. Well, if you're insane.
It gets you applause. Look, when you look at these speeches, and you should always keep this in mind, I think, when we look at these Trump speeches, we should remember, especially when it comes to decoding them, he speaks in applause lines, you know what I mean? He's looking for cheers. So even that line that kind of doesn't make any sense, you don't want Indiana to become the next Venezuela, do you? It's sort of like, No, I know. No, he gets the response, and that sort of congregation responding to him all the time leads him to say these things that are, frankly, pretty absurdist, but they do get a reaction.
Right. He realizes that the first half of his sentence, somewhere in his brain, doesn't make full sense, so he just goes for a joke in the back half. He's literally like, they're gonna raid Medicare for socialism, and nobody wants Lex Luthor to win. And everybody's like, you're right, we don't.
I also think the fact that we only have Venezuela to point to as a sort of failed state is indicative of just how afraid the right is for socialist ideas catching on. I think Venezuela and the United States couldn't be farther in terms of their similarities. They are so different from one another. Venezuela is not the United States. They do not have the amount of money that we have. They are not a hegemon. They are, and actually, and of course, yes, the economy is so screwed there. People are, digging in trash. But last I checked, people are also digging in trash down in downtown LA. Yeah. So we don't ever talk about the failures of capitalism. We only talk about the failures of socialism. And we say 1-to-1, the US is Venezuela, and it's gonna be the exact same. And we're gonna I hope we get a Caribbean coast, if that's the case.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because they have this one example of socialism failing. And I think it's not a hypothetical. We can come up with an example of capitalism leaving millions of people behind. What if you had a system that for decades wages were entirely stagnant, and in fact you just lost out year after year due to inflation? What if you had a system of healthcare where tens of millions of Americans don't end up with any health insurance? What if you had that? And then everybody gets scared in the crowd, and then they look around, they realize they're living in that country right now. That's an example that you can provide. And here's one of the bad things for Donald Trump. So he says to the audience, socialism is really bad, and they boo. They do boo for now, because for a very long time, the only place that they've heard about socialism or socialist policies is on Fox News, delivered with the keen historical insight of people like Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson. And there's been no counter argument up until now, but unfortunately they screwed up because they allowed people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to get elected, people who go on shows like Stephen Colbert and The Daily Show and talk about economic dignity and talk about being able to live a life in accordance with fundamental human dignity at the end of the day.
It's overrated, honestly.
Overrated?
Dignity, who needs dignity? I feel like a lot of times it's nice to go through life like not being dignified. It keeps you on your toes.
Totally.
It's just I'm just presenting the other side. I feel like it's good to cover
Devil's
both.
advocate.
Both
Dignity's overrated, you think, Ben?
Yes, it's overrated.
Okay.
I mean, if you can get it, sure, it's nice work if you can get it. But I'm just saying, is it necessary to live in America? Maybe not. Not according to Trump. I don't think so. I think it's important to be able just to push whatever program you want. The scariest part about it is that we just lack any sort of, not only context, but just any sort of measure between what could happen and what will happen. You mention one word and it's as though we're gonna overnight become something. You're not gonna become a socialist country because you embrace certain aspects, certain positive aspects of socialist ideas.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean tomorrow America's gonna be distributing everybody's wealth equally across the land. That's not what it's gonna be. But the fact that we don't have any, like you said, any concept of what these terms even mean, it makes you be able to say something like they're gonna raid Medicare, which is one of our closer to socialist programs, to pay for socialism, and people root on that thought. It's a nonsensical discord in your brain that if we can't even have terms and we know what they mean, there's just no way to have an intelligent discourse.
Well, this term has been captured for propaganda, right? Socialism, communism. These are terms they can use, and it's used in a propagandist way. So that's why they use socialism. They've weaponized socialism, even though, as we've said, socialism is used to bail out Wall Street. That's a form of socialism, right? And for the price supports, as you say, for those farmers who are suffering from the trade policy. So socialism is there in different ways. We don't call it socialism; we call it bailouts or whatever. But there are aspects of this socialism already very well a part of this economy.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, if corporations are now people, I wish we were able to just shame them, like call them welfare queens. Like they've demonized, African Americans and people on welfare, or anyone, not just African Americans, all people on welfare. But like, we never hear that. We need to shame corporations as people. You lazy bums, pay your workers fairly. Give them health care. I don't know how people yell at the homeless. I'm just trying.
You clearly have not berated the homeless enough.
No.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.